So if you're like most people, your brain is probably suffering from a pretty severe case of AI whiplash right now.
Oh, absolutely. One day the headlines are screaming that AI is a massive bubble.
Right, but the ROI just isn't there yet. And then the very next day, every pundit is panicking that, the robots are coming for your job.
The whole information landscape is just chaotic. And the truth, I think, has been hidden by these vague, often contradictory predictions. We've been missing a map.
A real high-resolution map. And thankfully, I think we finally have one.
Mm-hmm.
This is thanks to some really rigorous, massive-scale research from MIT and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. They've dubbed it Project Iceberg.
And it introduces this really powerful new metric, the Iceberg Index.
Yeah.
So what we want to do today is really unpack the source material from this groundbreaking study.
Exactly. Let's just cut through all the noise and understand the true quantified overlap between, human skills and what AI can actually do right now across the American economy.
And this isn't just a white paper. I mean, we have to be clear about that. It's a full-scale simulation. Researchers built a complete digital twin of the U.S. workforce.
Which is just incredible.
The kind of granularity we just never had before.
And here's the number that really acts as the hook for this whole conversation. $1.2 trillion.
It's a staggering number.
It really is. That's the shocking quantified figure in wages sitting just below the surface that almost all the headlines have completely missed. This is the submerged part of the iceberg.
To put that in perspective for you, I mean, $1.2 trillion is about the annual GDP of a country like Mexico.
Or nearly twice the budget for the entire U.S. defense R&D budget. That's the kind of economic mass we're talking about, hidden from view.
Oh.
Okay, so let's unpack this crucial metric.
I think we have to start by drawing a really critical and often misunderstood line between exposure and replacement.
Right.
This is where the whole conversation really pivots away from, the fear-mongering and toward a more realistic assessment.
And you've probably seen that initial viral headline. MIT study finds AI can already replace 11.7% of U.S. workforce. So you're saying that statement is, well, it's fundamentally flawed.
It is, because it confuses capability with adoption. The study defines exposure purely as a measure of technical capability.
Okay, so it's an engineering question.
Exactly, a very straightforward one. Can a current production-ready AI system perform this specific human task? If the answer is yes, then that skill and the wage value tied to it gets flagged as exposed.
But just because the tech exists doesn't mean displacement is a sure thing. You have to factor in all the economic reality.
The cost, legal hurdles, regulation.
And sometimes just sheer corporate inertia. It's really the difference between potential energy and kinetic energy.
The sources use this dishwasher analogy, and it's perfect. We've had the technology for decades to automate commercial dishwashing.
Sure.
Yet, so many restaurants still employ human dishwashers. Why? Because the human is often cheaper, more reliable, and way more flexible than installing and maintaining some complex machine.
So the Iceberg Index measures that potential energy, the pressure that's building up into the market, but not, guaranteed immediate doom.
Exactly. So that staggering 11.7% figure, it isn't a layoff prediction. It's a signal.
A signal that nearly 12% of the total U.S. wage value is now technically viable for automation, or at least significant augmentation, using AI that's already on the market.
And that's why the iceberg metaphor is so perfect.
Yeah.
When we talk about AI disruption, we are almost always just looking at the surface index.
The visible tip of the iceberg.
Right. The part that's already being automated or is, in the adoption pipeline.
And that visible tip is only about 2.2% of total wage value, so around $211 billion. This is the churn we see in the news.
The software developers, the data scientists.
Technical writers. And these jobs are super visible and concentrated in coastal tech hubs like San Francisco and Seattle.
But the study's central and I think most alarming finding is the iceberg index itself, the submerged mass.
That's the $1.2 trillion, the 11.7% that you mentioned. And the real shock here is that this hidden mass is not made up of coders and engineers.
No, they're largely above the waterline already.
The real disruption, the hidden part, is happening in white-collar roles that, well, they aren't glamorous or even necessarily tech-adjacent. Administrative support, financial analysis.
Healthcare coordination, HR, supply chain logistics, jobs that are all about processing, documentation, and compliance.
And that is the systemic blind spot. You see all these policy conversations, university curricula being changed, all being built for that tiny 2.2% of visible tech adoption.
Meanwhile, the true technical readiness is surging forward totally undetected across that massive hidden 11.7%. We're
Right.
building policy for the wrong problem.
So to understand why this $1.2 trillion is flagged as exposed, we have to talk about the engineering behind the map. I mean, this wasn't just a spreadsheet analysis. They built a digital twin of the entire U.S. workforce. That sounds staggeringly complex.
It was. They had to use something called the Agent Torch framework, and they ran it on the Frontier supercomputer at Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Which is one of the most powerful systems in the world.
They needed that kind of processing power just to handle the scale and the granularity of the model.
And the scale is immense. They based the simulation on three core pillars. First, you have the agents. 151 million digital agents, each one representing a real American worker.
With a specific location and a specific basket of skills.
Right. Then second, you have the skills. They meticulously broke down 923 occupations using the ONET database.
And for anyone who doesn't know, ONET is basically the standard government taxonomy for what people actually do at work.
And they took those occupations and broke them down into over 32,000 distinct measurable skills.
And third, the tools. This is key. They didn't just model, say, GPT-4. They cataloged over 13,000 real-world production-ready AI tools from all over the place.
Big enterprise platforms, but also small stuff you'd find on Zapier or OpenTools.
Exactly. So the simulation then performs this bottom-up mapping. It connects the specific capabilities of those 13,000 tools against those 32,000 skills. It's a highly targeted capability matching exercise.
Okay, wait. Setting aside the supercomputer for a second, how accurate can that truly be? Isn't there a risk of garbage in, garbage out when you're modeling 151 million lives from a database? Did they validate this?
Well, that's the point of the granularity. They aren't saying the logistics manager job is gone. They're saying this logistics worker in Tennessee spends 6 hours a day on scheduling.
Ah, okay.
And if a tool exists that can optimize logistics schedules, only those specific 6 hours of wage value are flagged as exposed. It targets the task, not the job title.
That makes the nuance much clearer. So a nurse's job is mostly safe because of the physical interaction.
Right.
But the 30% of their time spent on documentation and compliance checking, that's flagged as highly exposed because those are just cognitive administrative tasks.
The automation is targeting the cognitive burden within every job. And this leads us directly to what the researchers call the automation surprise.
Which basically challenges everything we assume about where AI risk is concentrated geographically.
We're all conditioned to think of AI as a coastal thing. Silicon Valley, Boston, New York.
But the data says the complete opposite. The Iceberg Index shows the exposure is distributed almost perfectly across the entire country. It just follows where the administrative layer is most dense.
And what's really fascinating is that states like Delaware and South Dakota, they actually have higher Iceberg Index scores than California.
Wow, that seems completely counterintuitive at first.
It does, until you look at their economies. These states rely heavily on corporate administration, banking, finance, insurance sectors, just defined by huge volumes of document processing and compliance checking.
So the $1.2 trillion it's the accounts payable clerk in Omaha, the insurance underwriter in Des Moines, the loan officer in Charlotte.
The supply chain coordinator in Memphis. It's the white-collar, middle American administrative layer that keeps the physical economy running. And they've been totally invisible in this conversation.
And when you connect that to the Rust Belt and manufacturing states, the automation surprise gets even more pronounced.
Yeah, when we think about automation risk in, say, Ohio or Tennessee, we picture physical robots welding cars. But the index reveals the exposure is almost entirely cognitive.
You can see this huge disconnect in the study's data table. Tennessee's Surface Index, their visible tech adoption, is a tiny 1.3%.
But their Iceberg Index, the hidden administrative risk, is 11.6%, nearly the same as the most tech-heavy states. Ohio shows a similar jump, from 1.5% visible to 11.8% hidden.
That leap is the blind spot in action. The disruption there isn't from a robot taking the welder's job.
No, it's coming from an algorithm taking the job of the person who schedules the welder, manages the inventory, or processes the payroll.
Which raises a really important question for policymakers. Why didn't we see this coming from our traditional economic metrics?
The problem is that the economic dashboards we use, GDP, unemployment rates, they are fundamentally broken for the AI era. They're all lagging indicators.
GDP tells you what happened yesterday. Unemployment tells you who lost a job last month.
Exactly. They can't see whose skills are currently being digitized and encoded into software before the company even hits the deploy button.
So the Iceberg Index is a leading indicator.
It is a powerful one. If you think about your car's dashboard, GDP and unemployment are like looking in the rearview mirror. The Iceberg Index is the check engine light flashing before you drive off the road.
It measures capability before adoption.
And that explains why we have these solid-looking economic numbers coexisting with this palpable market-wide anxiety. The anxiety see the iceberg, but the metrics only see the surface.
But the point of Project Iceberg isn't just to ring an alarm bell and create anxiety. It's presented as a tool, a proactive tool for planning and reskilling that really shifts the mood from doom to agency.
If you know exactly which skills and which zip codes are exposed, you can stop guessing about reskilling strategies. Those sources mentioned states like North Carolina, Tennessee, Utah are already using this data.
To validate and focus their workforce strategies, so instead of broad, generic training, they can find durable skills.
Yeah, those with low exposure scores in the
Yeah.
model. If the index shows routine coding is 90% exposed, you stop funding that curriculum. You shift resources toward low-exposure jobs, like systems architecture integration, which might only be 10% exposed.
Because it relies on human judgment and deep contextual understanding.
And beyond that, the index provides a kind of policy sandbox. Policymakers can simulate these critical what-if scenarios.
Like, what happens to County X if AI adoption in local financial services doubles next year?
Precisely, which allows resources, like retraining funds or investment incentives, to be sent to threatened communities before the layoffs even happen. It's a map for a planned evolution.
Now, we have to address a contradiction that I think confuses a lot of people. Like we said at the start, other reports show that AI pilot projects often fail because the economic ROI is low right now. So how do we reconcile that with this finding of $1.2 trillion in immediate technical exposure?
It really boils down to the difference between capability and friction. They're often confused. The index measures technical capability. The software can do the task. That's a fact.
Okay.
The failing pilot projects are measuring the economic friction of today. Bad data quality, legacy IT systems that don't talk to each other, regulatory hurdles.
Or just resistance from middle management. So the technology is ready, but the organization isn't.
Exactly. And friction tends to decrease dramatically over time.
Huh.
But capability, what the Iceberg Index measures, is increasing exponentially.
So the index is showing us the destination, while the ROI reports are just showing us the potholes on the road today.
We can't mistake today's organizational friction for a long-term technological limit.
So if we synthesize all of this, we really need to stop looking for a binary answer to the AI question. It's not all good or all bad. The reality is that 11.7% of the total economic value we create is just shifting. It's moving from being human exclusive to human AI collaborative territory.
And the Iceberg Index gives us the first high-resolution map of that shifting territory. It shows the risk is in the administrative centers, the logistics hubs of Memphis, the insurance offices of Hartford.
And the administrative layers of virtually every factory across the country.
Yep.
This is really a call for clarity for every leader, for every community. You have to look below the surface, beyond just the visible tech layoffs.
That $1.2 trillion is a massive amount of human energy that can be redirected, reallocated.
If we use this map effectively, if we plan with this knowledge, it becomes a societal evolution. If we ignore it, it will undoubtedly become a crisis of displacement.
And so as we move forward, armed with this specific knowledge that administrative wage value is most threatened across almost every state, what's the first immediate infrastructure investment a community should prioritize? One that complements these newly exposed tasks rather than trying to compete head-on with the technology. That is the choice we have to make now.